So I was sitting there scrolling through Twitter when someone DMs me saying, "Hey, you gotta cover this cryptocurrency heist. Some dude named Malone Lam and his buddies just disappeared with 230 million. And I'm thinking, that can't be real, right? Like, that's movie-level theft. But turns out this isn't some Ocean's 11 fantasy. This actually happened. And the craziest part? The way they pulled it off wasn't with some genius hack or Mission Impossible-style break-in. It was way simpler and way more terrifying for anyone who has crypto. This 20-year-old kid named Malone Lam literally walked away with 4,100 Bitcoin. That's not a typo. 4,100 whole-ass Bitcoins. Like, imagine having that much money and then just, it's gone. Poof, all because some guy in his 20s who probably still gets carded buying. Red Bull decided he wanted it more than you did. And the wild thing is this all went down just a few months ago in Washington, D.C., which proves crypto bros aren't even safe in the actual capital of America. So here's the crazy part. These guys didn't hack some super secure blockchain or write complex code to steal this money. They basically called a guy on the phone. You ever notice how in movies, hackers are always frantically typing on keyboards with green text scrolling everywhere while they break through firewalls? Well, Malone Lam and his buddies were like, nah, that's too much work, and just decided to pick up the phone instead. It all started in some random chat room where these guys were hanging out. I imagine them sitting there bored, scrolling through memes when someone was like, hey, you know what would be fun? Finding someone loaded with Bitcoin and just scamming them out of it. And the rest were like, sure, sounds like a chill Tuesday plan. Because apparently that's just a normal conversation for these dudes. They weren't looking for just anyone, though. They specifically targeted this wealthy investor in DC who was sitting on millions in cryptocurrency. And instead of planning some elaborate Ocean's 11 style heist with lasers and acrobatics, their master plan was literally, let's pretend to be tech support. Which is basically the, have you tried turning it off and on again, of criminal schemes. Their approach was actually pretty clever in its simplicity. First, they called the investor pretending to be Google tech support with this urgent message that his accounts had been compromised. Then they followed up with another call, this time claiming to be from his cryptocurrency exchange, repeating the same story. It's like when your mom and your aunt both tell you the same rumor, and you start thinking, well, if two people are saying it, the real genius of their scam was creating this perfect storm of fear and urgency. They didn't need to crack any passwords or break through security systems. They just needed to freak this guy out enough that he'd do whatever they suggested. Classic social engineering at its finest. Once they had the investor convinced, he was under attack. Plot twist, he actually was, just not in the way he thought. They manipulated him into resetting his security information. It's like convincing someone their house is on fire. So they'll hand you the keys to the safe. But here's where they pulled off their masterstroke. They somehow convinced this guy to share his screen with them. Now, for normal people, screen sharing might expose your embarrassing browser history or the fact that you have 47 tabs open. But for this crypto investor, it exposed his private Bitcoin keys, which is basically the digital equivalent of handing someone the combination to your bank vault while giving them a guided tour of where you keep all your money. Once they had those private keys, it was game over. They transferred a mind-blowing 4,100 Bitcoin worth about 230 million at the time, straight into their own wallets. And they weren't sloppy about it either. They immediately started splitting the Bitcoin into different accounts, using techniques like peel chains, and mixing services to make the stolen funds nearly impossible to trace. It's like taking stolen cash and washing it through 1,000 different laundromats. What makes this whole thing so wild is that they didn't exploit some technical vulnerability in the blockchain or use some crazy hacking tool. They exploited something much more basic, human trust. It proves that even with the most sophisticated digital security in the world, the weakest link is almost always the person behind the keyboard. Most criminals at least try to be sneaky with their stolen cash. But Malone Lam treated his 230 million heist like he'd won some twisted game show where the challenge was spend as conspicuously as possible without getting caught. Spoiler alert, he lost that game. While his buddies apparently had some common sense and didn't immediately start flexing their newfound wealth, Malone decided the best way to celebrate stealing hundreds of millions was to basically become a walking, talking red flag. You know how people joke about what they'd do if they won the lottery? This dude was living that fantasy, except with stolen money. Genius move, right? Let's talk about this Miami mansion he rented. Not just any place. A waterfront property costing him $68,000 every single month. That's not a typo. That's more than what most people make in an entire year. And this guy is dropping it monthly just on rent, not even buying the place. Just temporarily staying there while broadcasting to the world. Hey everyone, I suddenly have a suspicious amount of money. But the mansion was just the appetizer in this buffet of bad decisions. Malone went on to purchase around 30 exotic cars. 30, not 1 or 2, 30, including, and I swear I'm not making this up, a Lamborghini with his actual name painted on the side. Because when you're trying to hide from authorities, after stealing $230 million, what better way to blend in than driving a car that literally has your name plastered on it? It's like he was playing criminal hide-and-seek but shouting, "Here I am!" the entire time. His nightclub behavior was even more absurd. This man was dropping between $100,000 to $500,000 per night on bottle service. The club staff would put his name in lights, you know, in case the FBI needed help finding him. And he'd tip thousands in cash, just to make sure absolutely everyone remembered him. Nothing suspicious about a guy suddenly spending $500,000 in a night. Right?